Are we going? There we go. Good. I was going to say good morning again because that's when I do the videos, but maybe some of you aren't watching this till the evening, so I'll try to stop doing that. But we're almost done with this book. Chapter 23 is today. The revelation of the Scarlet Letter. So Dimmesdale has finished his sermon. The crowd starts to come out of the church, and on page 170 they talk about just how in awe the people were. They said, never had a man spoken so wise, so high, so holy, nor had inspiration ever breathed through mortal lips like his. So they just feel like he was so inspired as he was giving this sermon, and yet there was a sad undertone to it. The people admittedly were saying that it had the new coffee mug today. Isn't it beautiful? I like the shape of it. That's what I like about this one. Some of you did not comment yesterday's keywords, so you did not get participation points. So make sure that you are listening throughout this video to find the keywords, so that I can give you points. And you need to email it to me. Don't attach it to this post. Then you're giving everything away, and that's no fun. Like, everybody has to find it themselves. Stop giving answers, Claire, Megan. I'm kidding. It was fine. Okay. It's really hard to harass you guys when you're not here. I'm finding that I miss you guys. It's true. Okay, so the people say that even with how wonderful it was and how inspired it was, it has this sad undertone of regret of one who is soon to pass away. They talk about how he has a foreboding of untimely death, which seems really strange because he just gave this amazing sermon. So why would they be talking about him dying? Like, why would those two things fit in together? But anyway, the sermon was amazing. It was like he was inspired. So the music starts up again. The procession is headed out to go to the town hall for the banquet. The people just can't contain themselves anymore. They shout out, they're celebrating, all of that. And then it dies down as Dimmesdale comes out. And they are down to a murmur, and oh, there he is. And when he comes out, he's a completely different man. So during the sermon, he was full of energy. Remember, walking into the church, he was full of energy. He wasn't feeble. Now he's feeble, he's pale. It's like all of his energy is gone. He can barely stay on his feet. Reverend Wilson even comes up and tries to, offer him his arm. Dimmesdale refuses it. He kind of totters along. They compare it to a toddler who's just learning how to walk, like going towards the arms of their mother. And then he comes to the scaffold and he stops. And there stands Hester with her scarlet letter, holding hands with Pearl, and he pauses. And Governor Bellingham notices it, and he approaches, and he's ready to give him his hand and hold him up, but there's something in Dimmesdale's demeanor that he's like, and he kind of stands back. And all of a sudden, Dimmesdale says, "Come here, Hester. Come here, my little Pearl." And Pearl rushes to him, hugs him around the knees, totally different than when they were at the brook, when they were in the forest. In the forest, she wouldn't come to him. When he kissed her, she washed the kiss off at the brook. And now he says, "Come to me," and she does. They're in public now. All these times she has said, will you stand here on the scaffolding with us tomorrow? Will you walk hand in hand with us tomorrow? And the answer is always no. And now here he is, broad daylight. He's just given the most amazing sermon of his life. And he calls to her and says, come to me. And she rushes to him and wraps her arms around his knees. Hester comes forward, but she stops just before she reaches Dimmesdale. And then here comes Chillingworth, and he rushes in, and he whispers in Dimmesdale's ear, and he's like, "Stop it. Are you crazy? Send them away. Cast this woman off. It's not too late. I can save you." Don't put this black mark on your name of infamy. Like, don't do this. And Dimsdale says, it's too late. It's too late. You can't save me, nor can you hurt me any longer. And he even says to him, I shall escape thee. So he calls out to Hester again, and he says, help me do what I should have done 7 years ago. Give me your strength. Help me up onto the scaffold. She puts her arm around his waist, and she helps him get up the steps. She helps him stand there on the scaffolding. And on page 173, there's an awesome quote about Chillingworth because he follows them. So here goes Hester helping Dimmesdale up the steps. Pearl is on her other hand. The three of them are ascending the scaffolding, and Chillingworth is coming behind. On page 173, it said something about how it was only fitting that he should be there, quote, the drama of guilt and sorrow in which they had all been actors, and well entitled, therefore, to be present at its closing scene. I think that's a beautiful passage. The drama of guilt and sorrow. At the end of the customs house, there was something that talked about this being a story of guilt and sorrow. So we've come full circle to that point. And so Chillingworth is entitled to be present at its closing scene, the end of this drama. Okay. Chillingworth again is trying to stop him from doing this. He says, there's no place on earth where you could escape me, no place except the scaffolding. And Dimmesdale's response is, then thanks be to him who led me here. Then thanks be to God who led me here to the place where I can get away from you, the devil. Okay, so Dimmesdale still praising God, still worshiping God, still recognizing God's power in all of this, even to save him from the likes of Chillingworth. Then Dimmesdale turns to Hester and he says, isn't this better than what we planned in the forest? Isn't it better? Instead of running away, instead of being secretive, instead of committing more sins, isn't it better that it ends like this? We confess, it goes public, we've confessed before the Lord, we confess before the people, and this is the end of it. And she says, better? I don't know, because now we're all going to die. Like, the people, the magistrates are going to put all of us to death, even Pearl. When they find, as you reveal this and they find out what truly happened between us. And he says, you know what? I'm a dying man. Let me take on my shame as I go to my death. God will take care of you and Pearl. He's already provided your punishment. He's already provided you with the way to deal with this. He'll take care of you. But I'm dying. Now, this is where a lot of people are always like, what's he dying from? And it's not like he has any actual illness. The idea is that his guilt has just eaten him up. He's young. I read one commentary that they say that he was probably like 38 years old. But the idea is that his guilt has consumed him, and therefore he's dying. So he turns, he looks at the magistrates, he looks at Reverend Wilson, he looks at Governor Bellingham, and he looks out at the people in the crowd, and he tells them, you have deemed me a holy man. You have loved me, but look at me. Look at who I truly am, a sinner. Right now I'm standing where I should have stood 7 years ago with this woman, Hester. You shudder at her in the sight of her scarlet letter, but I stood among you with my own scarlet letter, my own sin, and you never shuddered at me. Hers was public, and you condemned her. Mine was hidden, and you loved me. And he throws off Hester's arm, takes a step forward, stands on his own, and he says, I hid it from you people. I hid it from mortal man. But God knew. The devil knew. And now I stand here. Look again at Hester. Look again at that scarlet letter. And now look here. And he tears away his I think they called it a robe or something. He tears it away and reveals his chest to the ground. And the inference here, I've gone back and looked and reread, and never do they come out and say what's there. But between the things that we've been told about his own torture, the things that he said about his own scarlet letter, the clutching of the chest, we're supposed to make the inference that there is an A on his own chest that he has made himself. And when Chillingworth pulled that away, he saw it. And now he takes off his shirt and he reveals it to the townspeople and says, look, I have my own scarlet letter. And then he sinks to the ground. He's dying. Chillingworth twice says, thou hast escaped me. Like, you got away. You told the people. Now everyone knows, and there's nothing I can do to you. There's nothing I can do to torment you, torture you. You got away from me. And even more so, he gets away because he's dying. Dimmesdale looks at him and says, may God forgive you. So in his dying last breaths, he looks at his enemy and says, may God forgive you too. You also have deeply sinned. The connection that I make is when Jesus is on the cross, he's still praying for us. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. If this is my cup, let me drink from it. You know, the different things that he says. I'm not trying to say that Chillingworth is Jesus. I'm just saying, look at some comparisons, look at some allusions, some references, and see some similarities of someone who is dying, and yet they are continuing to ask for the blessing on others. And then he turns to Pearl and Hester, and he says to Pearl, will you kiss me now? You wouldn't kiss me by the brook, but will you kiss me now? And Pearl leans in, and she gives him a kiss on his lips. And it says the spell was broken. So earlier, I think it was around chapter 18 or so, there was a comment made about Pearl, and it's in one of your note sheets, but there was a comment about how Pearl was almost inhuman. She doesn't seem to have that compassion that people are supposed to have, and how she needs one grief-stricken moment to cure her of that. And I shared with you my daughter Emily, and how, I wondered sometimes if she had a soul because she was just so uncaring and insincere when she was asked to give an apology, and it just didn't really matter to her, and even I felt like she didn't love me at times, because she didn't cuddle, she didn't want to be held, she wasn't a kissy huggy type child, and it just was really different for me. And when we had our house fire, there was a huge change in her, and she became one of the most compassionate people that I know when it concerns me. I shared a story about how we went to the jewelry store, and the lady was really pushing me about, is this a second marriage? And I finally said, our house burned down and I lost my wedding rings. And I started to sob. And it was only like the first time that I said it out loud that it had happened, and it made it so real that it had truly happened to us. And I started to sob, and Emily stepped in closer to me and rubbed my back and said, it's okay, Mama. it's okay. And from that moment on, she has been kind of my protector. She has, she goes out of her way to make sure that no one hurts me. And when people say mean things, you know, I joke about it and say the only thing that upsets Emily is if you talk bad about her dog or her mama. But it's true. She's very protective of me. She reminds me a lot of Pearl, a wild, free spirit. And Pearl just doesn't have that compassion. She doesn't care really about people. She's not a kind, caring, nurturing type soul. And it says on page 175 that the spell was broken. And this is the deep grief that Pearl needed to experience to become fully human. And it says that her tears were her pledge to grow up amid human. I didn't write it down very well. In your book, page 175. Pearl kissed his lips. A spell was broken. The great scene of grief in which the wild infant bore a part had developed all her sympathies, and as her tears fell upon her father's cheek, they, the tears, were the pledge that she would grow up amid human joy and sorrow, nor forever do battle with the world, but be a woman in it. So up to this point, she has battled with the world. People have been mean to her. Kids have thrown mud at her, called her names. She doesn't imagine kind, imaginary friends. Everything is a battle. Everybody's always against her. She's always fighting against something. And now she's not to do battle with the world, but to be a woman in it. And you're supposed to get the connotation of a woman as being kind, caring, nurturing, all those things. Towards her mother, too, Pearl's errand as a messenger of anguish was all fulfilled. So no longer is she going to be that. We talked a lot about how Pearl was her mother's punishment, but also her greatest joy, her greatest sorrow, her greatest grief, but also her greatest pleasure. No longer is she this punishment. No longer does she bring anguish and hurt to her mother. That's gone. That doesn't need to happen anymore. From this point forward, Pearl is going to be a source of pride, joy, love, happiness, and a positive remembrance of her love, Hester's love between Dimmesdale. So that's just a really important passage for Pearl's development as a character. And I have just a little bit more here. Dimmesdale looks at Hester and he just says, Hester, farewell. She, no, don't do this. Look into the future. Won't we be together in eternity? You're on the cusp. Can you see into eternity? Can you see if we're together? And Dimmesdale says, only God knows. We don't deserve it. Like when we decided to sin together, we ignored God. We don't deserve happiness. We don't deserve to have a life fulfilled together. But He is merciful. God has granted me this agony, this punishment, and this death. His will be done. Farewell. And at this point, the crowd is just in awe. Like, they can't believe what they have just witnessed. Their minister just went up on the scaffold, admitted to being the baby daddy, admitted to being in love with Hester Prynne, tore aside his shirt and showed, here's my own scarlet letter, and then he collapses and dies right in front of them. If that's not dramatic, I don't know what is. Read chapter 24 for tomorrow. Last one. See ya.